The Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has arrived in China for a 4-day state visit, during which he will meet the Chinese President Xi Jinping, and his trip marks the first by a Canadian leader to China in 8 years.
Foreign Minister Anita Anand says it's part of efforts to reset what he calls a complex bilateral relationship.
China, another one of the world's largest economies and Canada's second largest trading partner, is certainly high on the list of a country where we need to sit at the table and have a negotiation and ensure while we are doing that we are representing Canada's security interests and the interests of Canadians. As I said, that is a complex issue. It is a complex relationship, but Prime Minister Carney is here to recalibrate the Canada-China relationship.
Mr. Carney's arrival came as fresh data revealed China bought fewer goods from Canada last year for the first time since 2020. Chinese imports from Canada fell 10.4% in 2025 from an all-time high a year earlier.
The trip is set to narrow a years-long rift that widened 2 years ago when former Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau slapped 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Beijing imposed levies on Canadian canola in retaliation. Analysts say one of Mr. Carney's objectives while in Beijing is to ease those tariffs, which have hurt Canadian farmers. And for more, let's bring in Margaret McCuaig-Johnston, Senior Fellow, Graduate School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Ottawa. Margaret, thanks for your time today. So this is the first visit by a Canadian Prime Minister to China in nearly a decade. I mean, how significant is this trip from Beijing and Ottawa's perspective, especially as both countries are facing tensions with Washington?
That's right. This is very exciting. It's part of Prime Minister Carney's massive attempt to expand our trade, expand our exports, and diversify away from the United States. Because we've seen that the U.S. now is a really erratic trading partner. We have a free trade agreement with the U.S., but despite that, they've slapped tariffs on our autos and steel and aluminum. And we're heading into intense negotiations this year with the U.S. So Prime Minister Carney has seen that we need to diversify to other countries. And so he's been on the road really for the last year. It's quite amazing the extent to which he's traveled. And the Indo-Pacific is a really big part of that. So this is his, I think, third trip to the Indo-Pacific region in the last year, and his first to China, and the first, as you say, of a Canadian leader in 8 years.
And referring to fresh data we were just talking about moments ago, how is the recent drop in trade volumes likely to shape the tone or the substance of Canada's engagement with Chinese leaders during Mr. Carney's visit?
Well, that drop in trade is largely from canola. 67% of canola, or it's called rapeseed in other countries, goes to China. And when China wants to change Canadian policy, they put a big tariff on canola. And so our farmers have not had that export market for the last year. What they have done, though, is they've sent a lot of extra canola to the UAE, and then the UAE is reselling it to China. So China's getting its tariff and eating its canola, too. So that's largely from canola. And if the two sides can really come to an agreement over the coming days, then we should see that trade start to lift up again.
Yeah, Canada, as we know, is committed to doubling its non-U.S. trade. I mean, is this goal economically feasible without Canada becoming strategically dependent on Chinese state-owned enterprises, especially when it comes to those critical sectors? I'm talking about energy, minerals as well.
Well, in fact, this is going to be over 10 years, so it's not a short-term objective. At the same time, the Prime Minister has been to the Middle East and all over Europe. And so he's really extending our trade, diversifying to many, many other countries. It's not just China. And in fact, I don't see a major play in China in the short term. We can fix the canola issue, but and in the medium term, we may be able to send more oil to China. But this is, I think, getting the relationship in general back on track, because it's really, from the Chinese side, been a freeze for the last 8 years. They were not fond of Prime Minister Trudeau.
Yeah, I also want to take a look at, the U.S.'s blockade of Venezuelan oil, and now that's left Chinese refiners looking to Canada's pipeline. I mean, does this new energy dependency perhaps give Canada some leverage?
Yes. So Canada will be a source of for China of energy. And in fact, what I've recommended is that one of the things that Canada can put on the table for China to persuade it to lift its canola tariff is increased investment in Canadian conventional energy. And that's something that we expect that China will be very interested in. We have some major infrastructure projects being built, particularly to the West Coast of Canada. This is part of Prime Minister Carney's boost to the economy. And so this is something that China will be able to take advantage of. I don't include clean energy in that, although Prime Minister Carney has put that clean energy on the table, or perhaps I should say the Chinese have put that on the agenda. The Chinese partners with clean energy companies from Canada have really taken advantage of our companies in their joint ventures in China, with the Chinese partner often, always having a large majority of the share, and then taking over the whole joint venture over time and taking the intellectual property. So that's been a big problem for Canadian companies. And I think we need to protect our small and medium-sized companies.
And finally, Margaret, how is Washington likely to interpret Canada's outreach to Beijing at this moment? And what does that tell us about the US's own strategic priorities in the region?
This is a real sensitivity because our trade negotiations are coming up in the coming months. We can expect that China will be pleased to put a wedge between Canada and the U.S. The U.S. itself is putting a wedge with Canada, so and with China. But so we have to be very careful. And one of the things that China would like us to do is drop tariffs on Chinese EVs or even manufacture in Canada. There would be a lot of risk in doing that with the Chinese, with the U.S. automotive sector, really as a North American auto sector right now. And we'd like to keep it as a unified North American auto sector. And that would really be put at risk if we brought in Chinese EVs.
Thank you so much for all your analysis today and for joining us on CNA. Margaret McCuaig-Johnston, Senior Fellow, Graduate School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Ottawa.